Hello, students. Today I'm going to introduce Plato's Republic to you as a first read. Let's go ahead and take a look at our learning objectives. Our learning objective is, after an initial reading and discussion of the text, students will be able to use descriptive language and imagery in order to visualize what is being described. Before we dig into this text, I just want to give you a little historical background. So, this was written by Plato in ancient Greece, probably around 500 BC, so a very, very long time ago. And ancient Greece today looks like, this beautiful pile of ruins that all the tourists go and take pictures in front of, like these old like colosseums and stuff. But back in its heyday in 500 BC, it was really a thriving Mecca, and Athens was its biggest city, and it was considered a culture, central culture of politics, of art, of theater, music, of philosophy, of education, and I would say that modern Western ideas and thought really stem from ancient Greece. So, two very important figures in Athens, which was the largest city of ancient Greece, were Socrates and his student Plato. They started a university system of philosophy and had a lot of students, and really were what we consider to be the founders of Western philosophy. Now, what's really interesting about these two guys is that we don't have anything in writing from Socrates. That's not to say he didn't write, but maybe whatever he wrote didn't survive through the ages. But we do have a lot of writings from Plato, and Plato always writes about his teacher Socrates. So, in other words, everything that we know about this guy here, Socrates, comes from his student Plato. And he wrote in a very peculiar style of what we call Socratic dialogue, where most of Plato's writings were conversations that his teacher Socrates had with students, with politicians, with people around the town, around Athens. And so that's how we know so much about Socrates, is because of Plato's Socratic dialogues, which was surprisingly a very common way to teach back then. All right, let's go ahead and get back over to our lesson. Don't know why that popped up. So let's read through our introduction here together. Comprising 10 books, The Republic is one of Plato's longest works, setting forth his ideas on government and justice in both political and personal terms. Using his late mentor, Socrates, I should mention that by the time that he wrote Republic, Socrates had already died, so that's why he's referenced as his late mentor. Using his late mentor, Socrates, as his voice, in characteristic Socratic dialogues, meaning that the story is Socrates' conversations, Plato explores relationships between concepts such as rationality and desire, leaving behind an enduring philosophy of human thought and action. In this excerpt, Socrates presents his ideas on education through in the analogy of being led from the shadows of a cave to pure sunlight outside. So this portion of the Republic, which again comprises of 10 books, what we're looking at is, I believe, book 7 out of 10. This portion of it is oftentimes called the allegory of the cave. And it is in reference to gaining education, the process, sometimes painful process, of gaining education. Make sure that you take a minute to watch the introductory video before you move on. It will help set the stage for what's coming. And hop over to the vocabulary tab. There are some words in here that you may not know, so make sure that you take the time to understand them. Complete the drag and drop activity. You do not have to complete the sample sentences portion. Just the drag and drop is sufficient. All right, let's go over to the reading section here. I do have some discussion questions for when you finish reading this. If you could take some time to make sure that you can answer these either on your own, in your own notebook, or if you want to have a conversation with a partner, this is a great way to make sure that you've got some of the basic details down. There is a summary of the text that I would highly, highly recommend reading before trying to get into the story. I think that this summary will help you really follow the story quite a bit more easily, because the story itself is written as a dialogue. It's almost like reading a play in a way, a back and forth exchange and conversation between Socrates and another student by the name of Glaucon. It can be a little bit confusing to follow. It's back and forth, and you have to try to sort out who's talking and exactly what they're saying. So let me just give you a few more things before I let you go to start reading this. Um, so this is a style of teaching that they used in ancient Greece called the Socratic method, and we still use it quite often today, but it's really based on a series of questions that Socrates would ask his students to help them examine their own beliefs about things and try to reach a new understanding of how to be an ethical person, or how to live and gain knowledge and wisdom in this world. And so it's really, a lot of it is Socrates asking questions and then his student Glaucon responding. Plato liked to use a lot of analogies and metaphors, and in this case, it's really no different. He's using in this story the metaphor of a cave and people who are stuck in this cave, chained up almost like prisoners in this cave, who are being brought out to see the light. And that's a metaphor for gaining knowledge. And one of the metaphors he uses here is how painful it would be to go from living in the complete darkness to suddenly being exposed to this bright light, that it would be very blinding and it would be very painful at first until you begin to adjust to it over time. And so that's kind of a nutshell of the allegory that he uses here. But he also goes further in that to talking about what he sees the role of philosophers being in their culture and society. And that's going to be towards the end of this dialogue exchange, where he really starts arguing that it should be the philosophers who are in charge of the government. And he's saying that because the philosophers, in his opinion, are the ones who have spent the most time gaining knowledge. And to lead the nation and lead the city, you should be very knowledgeable. And it's really the philosophers who have obtained that higher wisdom. So, it's it's a little bit, I don't know, some people might say it's a little bit arrogant for him to be like, well, I should be the one in charge because I'm a philosopher. But this is a common gripe that Plato always had. Why aren't the philosophers listened to? In fact, the book before this one in the Republic series, book 6, was all a big metaphor about a ship. And the ship was a metaphor for the state itself. And the ship navigator was nearsighted, meaning he couldn't see very far into the future. And that's sort of a metaphor for their current state of their politics, according to Plato, that they had no foresight, no vision, and that all of the politicians were like the people on the ship who were constantly arguing about where they should go. And the only person who really knew where they should go was the philosopher, who was the navigator of the boat. But of course, nobody would listen to the philosopher because, who listens to philosophers? So that's something that you're going to see in this story as well, that he sets up these lengthy metaphors about how difficult it is to gain knowledge and how painful of a process it is, and how when you do finally come around to the light, that and adjust to it and really understand the true nature of things, then you're going to be rejected by people, because people just think that people who understand the truth of all things are just weird and they can't relate to them anymore. So they're going to reject him. And furthermore, that if he had his way, philosophers would be the one who are ruling the state. So keep all that in mind as you're reading through this. But really, as the learning objective said, what you're going to want to look at is all of his descriptive language that he's using in this long metaphor of the cave, the imagery that he's using in order to make his point of these chained prisoners who are brought out to the light, and using that as a metaphor for the process of gaining knowledge. Highlight for those things as you go through. Highlight descriptive language. Highlight important imagery that stands out to you, because you'll be using that later. And of course, when you are finished with this reading, then go ahead and take the reading quiz, the 10-question multiple choice quiz, and submit this assignment. I actually like this story. A lot of people find it terribly confusing, but if you would like to talk to me about it after you've read it, if you are lost in it and would like a quick rundown of it, then please come talk to me. I'd be happy to do that.